In today's video, we are in my living room and we are just going to have a bit of a chat. If you're new to the channel, my name is Jono. I used to be a practicing lawyer working in the corporate world for about 3 years until I decided to take the biggest risk in my life. I quit my well-respected, high-paying six-figure corporate job as a lawyer to start up a videography business with my best mate, Jason. And we decided to document this entire journey of entrepreneurship and content creation through this YouTube channel. And so for the guys that have been watching for a while now, thank you for following along. Or if you just discovered me for the first time, welcome. Love to meet you guys. Today in this video, I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about why I left the law and what a lot of friends who speak to me these days, they ask me, would I ever go back? And so in this video, I'm going to be talking you guys through my thought process on taking the leap of faith. Now, I am actually a big fan of history. And the reason why I think I like history so much is because oftentimes things that happen in the current moment, present events, are oftentimes dictated by a series of events that have happened in the past. And to fully explain my thought process of why I decided to leave the law and pursue something that was uncertain in the form of entrepreneurship, starting my own business and content creation, I think I have to really rewind the clock and bring you guys through each stage of my life that ultimately led up to this decision. Apologies in advance, this video is not going to be as structured as my usual videos. Usually with our videos, I try to be as succinct as possible and try to deliver as much value as possible. But today, it might be a bit more of a rambly video because I'm really just explaining through my thought processes, and hopefully just by being as raw and authentic with you guys as possible with my feelings and emotions. Hopefully, if you are in a similar position to me in terms of your upbringing or experiences, you might be able to actually draw some insights and apply it to your own journey. And so let's start with chapter 1, which was actually growing up. So I actually grew up in an Asian immigrant household. My mom and dad came from China to Australia in their early 20s with zero money in the bank and not really knowing a word of English. And so it was a pretty tough life for them. So growing up, I was constantly told a narrative of sacrifice. You know, my mum and dad sacrificed their golden years, their 20s, to come to Australia to establish themselves in order to give me and my sister the best opportunities to have a good life. And so, you know, growing up, my mum used to always tell me stories of how when she first came to Australia, she would be living in an apartment with 5 to 6 other people. And oftentimes she'd go hungry because she'd leave the last bit of bread for my uncle to eat. And these stories of hardship and sacrifice ultimately taught me the values of hard work and education. Through hard work and good education, that was our way out. That was the key to having a better life. And so from a very young age, because of my upbringing, those two values of hard work and education were paramount in my way of thinking. And because I was constantly reinforced with this narrative of sacrifice, I think from a very young age, I always had this desire to work as hard as possible to make the most out of the opportunities that were given to me growing up in Australia. And ultimately, I think every Asian immigrant kid can relate to this, but this inherent desire to ultimately make your parents proud. Chapter 2, high school. As I approached the end of high school and it came time to decide what I wanted to study in university, like a lot of kids at that time, I didn't really know what to do. And in that school, I would say that it was a very competitive and cutthroat environment. I can say that because I actually changed high schools midway. I was going to a local high school from year 7 to year 9, and I actually changed to this high school in year 10. So I could definitely see the drastic difference in terms of competition and also the level of talent. It was pretty common practice. A lot of our friends would used to just work and study as hard as possible because we just wanted to beat each other with our marks. Whoever had the higher marks is basically like following your sports team. Like if my sports team beat your sports team over the weekend, I had bragging rights over you. And for some reason in the high school that I went to, that was what we did with our marks. If we got higher marks compared to our friends, we could basically brag about it. And as a result, we would have higher status. And so even though I didn't really know what I wanted to study in university, my thought pattern at the time in high school was if I just worked as hard as possible and got the highest grades as possible, number one, I'd get bragging rights over my friends, but number two, I would basically have my pick of the litter in terms of having a lot of options when I finally went into university. Funnily enough, near the end of high school, I was also watching this TV show called Suits, which is about this genius who never went to law school but ends up becoming this really kick-ass corporate lawyer. And I remember watching that show being like, oh, being a lawyer seems really badass. Watching that show, in addition to seeing most of my friends go into either medical school or law school, and also the fact that going to law school would obviously make my parents super proud, I decided that's what I wanted to study in university. I still remember back in year 10, I did a filmmaking elective in high school and I really enjoyed it. And growing up, I'd actually always been very creative. From a very young age, I was in art classes and I loved drawing. And in year 9, I even remember producing a soft drink commercial with 3 friends. I storyboarded, filmed, and edited the entire thing. And I still remember my year 9 commerce teacher loving that video so much that she ended up using that project as an example to show her other students in subsequent years. But even though I had always been really creative, I never thought that this could be a viable career path or a legit business opportunity down the track. It was just an interest at that time, something that I just really enjoyed doing. But again, at the high school that I went to, the career paths were pretty set in stone. You were either going to be basically a doctor, some sort of consultant, lawyer, or an engineer. And looking back now, it's pretty funny to think that my life decision to go to law school was basically dictated by the fact that I was watching a TV show about lawyers at the time. Okay, so now chapter 3, going into university and embracing competition. Okay, so now going into university, university was much the same as high school, a very cutthroat and competitive environment. The kids that get into law school are basically the cream of the crop, the best of the best. And I still remember one of the classes, there's this thing called class participation in law school where the more that you raise up your hand and contribute to the class discussion, the more marks that you get. And I still remember one of these first classes, everyone is so keen when they first get into law school. Everyone's super smart and they want to show other people how smart they are. And so everyone was just competing, putting up their hands as much as possible, trying to contribute as much as possible based on their ratings from the week before. And I still just remember one of those first classes, raising my hand to try to contribute something smart to the group. I was basically just trying to say something smart, even though I didn't really know what I was talking about. And I just remember that one of those first classes just feeling so disingenuous. Like deep down, it felt like this wasn't really for me. It wasn't what I was truly aligned with. But again, I think similar to high school, my competitive nature just really kicked in. Even though I wasn't super passionate about the law, what I found really fun was the competition. Just being able to compete with really smart people, being the underdog, but using my work ethic to basically outwork people and get to the very top. Outside of the academic side of law school and university, one really memorable experience that I had that really basically changed the direction of my life was going on exchange when I was 19. I went for 6 months to study abroad in Austin, Texas, by myself at 19, which at the time was pretty scary because I had never been overseas by myself before that. And that experience alone gave me a lot of self-confidence and belief in my own abilities. Particularly, it really trained my ability to not really care too much about other people's opinions. Because back then, when I was 19, I struggled with issues of self-confidence. I really cared a lot about what other people thought of me. And this made me feel very insecure. But I remember the first day when I arrived in the US, I hopped off the plane and I thought to myself, wow, I am on the other side of the world and no one knows who I am or what I do. I can basically do anything I want and no one would give a shit. And that was a very freeing experience that I think allowed me to do things like get into business later on. Because when it comes to things like starting a business or putting yourself out there on YouTube and on the internet, you have to have an element of thick skin to you. You're going to face haters and the opinions of other people, and you have to learn to block that out and take action towards your goals regardless. And I think that experience of going on exchange really instilled that into me. Another big thing about going on exchange when I was 19 was I was exposed to people that were pursuing a different life path. Before that, I was basically living in a bit of a bubble. I went to a really prestigious high school. I went into law school. So everyone was going along that default path. But when I went on exchange, I was staying in hostels where I was meeting people who, for example, had quit their jobs and just gone backpacking for a year or two, or who just decided to uproot their entire lives and become a nomad essentially. So that was the first time where I started being exposed to people who were living a completely different life path to what I was taught growing up. And that really opened my eyes up to the world of what is actually possible or what was actually out there in the world. And so I had an amazing time studying abroad for those 6 months in Austin, Texas. Hook 'em. But yeah, ultimately I came back and I resumed university and I was back on the default path again. I set myself an ambitious goal of graduating law school with honors, and I even actually managed to graduate top 20 in my class. And all the hard work that had been instilled in me growing up paid off because I ended up securing a pretty decent graduate position before I even finished university. And that leads me into starting up my legal career. I'm not used to sitting on the ground, and this couch keeps on pushing back. During this video, you might just see me leaning back lower and lower and lower until I'm probably lying down. Anyways, all right, let's just bring this couch back up. Next time I'm gonna put a weight on this couch so it doesn't keep sliding. So before I actually started full-time work in the corporate world, I actually took a gap semester. And that's one of the benefits of working hard and giving yourself options in life, I think, is it's not so much about the prestige and the status of getting a job, but it's more about, I think working hard gives you options in life. Like if I hadn't of studied hard and worked hard to get the best grades as possible in high school, I wouldn't have had all those different options when I finally got into university. Even though I didn't really know what I wanted to study in university, the fact that I had a lot of options was a very liberating feeling. And the same thing when I finished university, the fact that I had worked really hard, got the best grades possible so that I could secure a really decent graduate position before I finished uni, meant that I had freedom to take a gap semester and travel abroad and go backpacking with my mates. Like a lot of my friends who finished law school, they had to spend the next couple months afterwards stressing out about finding a job. But for me, I could just piss off to Europe for 6 months and just travel with my mates, go to the World Cup in Russia, go hiking in Norway. And that freedom was because I put in the hard work beforehand. And that's always been a recurring theme in my life. This thinking that freedom is not given to you. Freedom has to be earned. So if you want freedom, if you want options in life, you have to develop the skills and put yourself in the position to have those options. It's not given to you automatically. And so during my gap semester, before I was due to start work in the corporate world, I also started pursuing some interests of mine. So I started up a cooking blog. At the time, it was called Jono the Student Cook, where I was just documenting some of my favorite recipes on the blog. And then Jason one day approached me and saying, hey, why don't we put these recipes into video form and start up a YouTube channel? And so that's where we actually started up our own YouTube channel, which at the time was called Jono the Student Cook. I was the only one in front of the camera, but then eventually once Jason started coming in more in front of the camera and we started basically working on this project together, this was the first time where I felt like I was working on a project purely because I had a genuine interest in it, not because I was trying to compete with anyone, not because there was some sort of external circumstance dictating me to do this thing or because I wanted to impress my parents. I genuinely was doing this because number one, I had a really deep interest in cooking at the time and we really loved making videos. I rediscovered that love since from a very young age, but I had obviously forgotten it as I started pursuing these more external status-seeking opportunities. So near the start of 2019 was what actually marked the start of my, you could say, our content creation journey. But obviously, it wasn't much at the time. We weren't making any money from this. And, it got to a point where obviously it was time to be an adult. My graduate program was due to start in Feb 2019, and I entered the corporate world and started my full-time job as a practicing lawyer. And, first 6 months of working in the corporate world is pretty exciting. You get to wear a fancy suit, go into a nice office. You're very well respected. People are like, oh, wow, you're a lawyer now, And, it was really exciting being able to work on big projects with big clients. And, that feels really cool, because it feels like you're contributing things to the real world. And those first 6 to 12 months working in corporate were invaluable. They taught me so much in terms of my soft skills. Things like communication, attention to detail, learning how to start and finish project from the beginning to end. All these little soft skills were things that I still currently apply and bring into our business to this day. But after about 6 to 12 months, I did start feeling that corporate became a little bit stale. It was basically the same routine every day. I would wake up at a certain time, commute to work, spend 8, 9 hours in the office, commute back home, have maybe like an hour or two to myself. Maybe I go to the gym, maybe I go play some soccer, and then I'd go to bed and basically just repeat the entire process again. Basically, looking forward to the Friday when it's basically the end of the week. I can enjoy a beer, enjoy the weekend, but then by Sunday afternoon, I would start feeling that little pit in my chest. Me and my girlfriend, we call it Mondayitis, where your chest just sinks a little bit thinking about going into work the next day. I don't know, that feeling just didn't seem right. And I didn't really want that feeling for the next 40 years of my life. Growing up, I'd always viewed my life in terms of stages. So obviously I had 6 years in high school. If I just worked as hard as possible in those 6 years, I knew that then I would put myself in a really good position once I got into university. I would have options when I got into university. Same thing with university. If I worked really hard in university, I got the best grades as possible. By the time I graduated university, I would have my pick of the litter when it came to jobs. So I always thought of life in terms of 6 year stages. But now that I entered the corporate world and I started my first job, it wasn't a 6 year stage anymore. It was the next 40 years of my life. So if I work as hard as possible for the next 40 years of my life, I'll be in a great position. I'll make partner, I'll make a chunk of money, I'll retire rich, and I'll get to enjoy life after that. But for me, that just felt too long. I always thought of life in terms of 6 years. I think that 40-year timeline just kind of scared me a little bit. I didn't really see myself doing that for 40 years. When I looked at the people above me, the partners that I was working for, I didn't really want to get to their position. I didn't really want their life. And so that kind of started creating some doubts in my mind. Was this the right path for me? And at the time, because I was into content creation and creating videos and stuff, I was following a lot of YouTubers and entrepreneurs like Gary Vee. Peter McKinnon obviously was a big idol of ours since we started getting into videography and photography. And so at the time, all my idols were YouTubers and entrepreneurs, people who had a lot of creative freedom, autonomy over their life and their time, and who actually were working on projects that lit them up and made a meaningful impact on the world. It wasn't the law firm partners that I was working for. And so deep down, that made me start thinking, maybe I should start finding another path. Maybe this is not the right path for me long term. And so deep down, I think that was what ultimately sparked my decision to start up that little side hustle with Jason in 2020, which eventually grew to a point by the end of 2021 where we were at a point with our side hustle where I felt comfortable enough to quit my job because I felt like I could rely on that side hustle to have enough income to sustain my lifestyle. And that ultimately put me in a position where I was able to take the leap of faith. I quit my job in 2022 to pursue our videography business with Jason full time. And ever since then, we've been growing our business, doing branded content for brands and companies, and also wedding photography and videography for couples over the last couple of years. And after our first year in business, we were able to turn that into a multi-six-figure business. And ever since then, we've been documenting our journey, our learnings, experiences, or the failures along the way to basically help someone who may have been in our shoes back 4 or 5 years ago, when maybe they're still in university, maybe they're transitioning between university, full-time job, or maybe they're currently in a full-time job and they're feeling stuck and they're wanting more out of life. Just creating videos to inspire those people and to make them aware of what is actually possible if you decide to take a risk and bet on yourself. Because there's nothing special about us. We're just two normal guys. It's funny how so many people in our community really look up to where we are in our journey and they really want to be where we are. But for us, it feels like we're not even halfway to where we want to go. And so, yeah, we're just documenting our journey along the way. Hopefully our insights are helpful and you can draw some golden nuggets to apply to your own journey. And it's been a bit of a rambly video, so I apologize for that. But I think what I'll end with is this, which is I recently came across this quote from a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. One of the top 5 regrets of the dying was, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself rather than the life that others expected of me. And based on how I was brought up, based on, the high school and the university that I went to, there was a certain life that was expected of me. That life was, to be honest, it's a good life. It's a comfortable life. Not easy, but it's a comfortable life. There is a very high degree of certainty to success there, and whether that's financial success, I'm not too sure if it's much in terms of mental well-being and things like that. But yeah, definitely in terms of financial success, that path was a very comfortable and certain path to pursue. So I understand why that was the life that was expected of me. Get good grades, go to university. In my situation, it was to go to law school, get good grades in law school, get a high-paying job, grind for the next 30 to 40 years, make partner at a law firm, and basically, as one of my colleagues used to say, ride the gravy train. But I don't know, just deep down, that didn't really feel like me. I'm always of the view that life is one big adventure. I think we're at an age now with the internet and all the opportunities with things like AI, content creation. I think a person's career can be multifaceted. Just because you're doing something right now doesn't mean that in 4 to 5 years' time you'll be doing that. So even for myself, I was a lawyer for 3 to 4 years. Then I decided to quit that, start up a videography business with my best mate. I've been doing that for the last 2 to 3 years. In 3 to 4 years' time, I don't know what else I'll be doing. I may not be doing this videography stuff, I may be doing more YouTube, for example, and sharing more stories on YouTube and trying to make a bigger impact on the world. I don't know. I have other interests in life as well. Like, for example, I'm also really into things like property investing and personal finance. So even maybe finding a career in that space down the track as well, or even health and fitness. Like growing up, I've loved soccer. These days, I've started taking up things like bouldering and snowboarding. I'm not very good at it yet, but again, I wouldn't rule out potential career options in those fields down the track as well. So what I'm trying to say is life is just one big adventure. Just because you are on one path right now doesn't mean that that is the path that you are going to be going on for the next 40 years. I think we're in a world right now where there is just so much opportunity. So don't bind yourself to the traditional way of thinking that just because you go into university and you study a degree, that's going to be the thing you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. But what I will have to say is freedom is not given to you. Freedom is earned. And I think you only have freedom when you have options in life. Going back again throughout my journey, I worked really hard in high school so that I'd have options when I got into university. In university, I worked really hard so that I could have options when it came to finding a job. And even once I got into my job and I started working full time, I worked really hard to build up my side hustle so that I could have options. It wasn't easy developing this skill of videography and building up that side hustle outside of my 9 to 5. It was pretty fucking hard work. I would work from 9 to 7 for basically my 9 to 5. And then after dinner at 8, I'd basically be working oftentimes from 8 to midnight building this side hustle. So it wasn't easy work, and I'd say it's definitely not for everyone. But again, freedom is not given to you. Freedom is earned. And the fact that I had the option to leave my 9 to 5 and pursue my videography business full time was because I put in so much work in the 2 years leading up to that decision to take the leap of faith. Life is one big adventure. What you're doing right now might not be what you're doing in 5, 10 years time. And that's okay. Embrace the uncertainty. But I will say this, the biggest thing that has helped me get to where I am today, and I know is the thing that's going to help me get to where I want to get to in 5, 10 years time, is this ability to work hard and learn new things. It goes back to my upbringing, growing up in that Asian immigrant household and learning the values of hard work and education. Those were the two things that were the keys to a good life. Freedom is not given to you, it's earned. So if you want options in life, if you want more autonomy of your time and your lifestyle, you have to earn it through hard work and education. And that doesn't mean traditional education in terms of going into university. It could just mean education in terms of learning new skills. Like, for example, the skill of videography, photography, and building a business. I didn't learn any of these skills through university. I learned them by watching YouTube videos, having mentors, and taking online courses. So don't just think about education in the traditional sense with university. There's so many other ways that you can get education to change your life. And for me, YouTube was a big factor to that. And that is the reason why we decide to share our experiences, our learnings, and our failures on YouTube. Because I honestly think it's just such a great platform, and it's changed my life, and hopefully it can change the life of a few people in our community as well. Anyways, guys, that was a pretty long and rambling video. If you guys have stayed to the very end, thank you, because you guys are the real OGs. And from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate you guys. Let us know if you enjoy sort of these more raw and authentic videos, I guess, where we're just sharing our thoughts and feelings. I'm not sure if you guys gain much value from it. Hopefully you do. If you are a beginner videographer who's looking to take your videography journey to the next level, go check out all of our free resources below to our 7-day videography email crash course, and also our credit kit, which contains our pre-production guides that we've used for real shoots in the past. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Give this video a like, comment down below, share your thoughts, and I will see you in the next video. Make sure you go check out this video here on how I became a videographer in 3 months. Bye, guys.